Levi, I'm so excited to be able to talk to you today. It's so good to have you.
Like it's always fun in person, on Zooms, life, everything.
I know. And we have a very interesting friendship because it started in ministry. You know, you and I were on a podcast together years ago, which is kind of crazy because you just never know when you interact with somebody what God has planned for that specific interaction.
Yeah, it's true. We
Um,
were on that Relevant magazine podcast on relationships, and we were
yeah,
both
we're trying to
promoting stuff, talking. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And then I'll never forget you said kind of like people thought you were joking, but I remember you said something like, "Hey, so you're a counselor. Can I get your phone number because we could use some counseling." And I think there was like a little bit of laughter, but you're like, "No, I'm serious."
yes,
Like, I'm not
absolutely.
joking.
Yeah, no, it's true. And knowing you've helped counsel pastors and leaders, and that's a unique thing too. I think being in ministry, the pastoral side of it, but then also the platform side of it, and then the complexities of all of that with marriage. We were just excited to find someone who's had some experience in that world, and you've been very helpful to Jenny and I personally, and in our marriage as well.
Yeah, it was really neat. It was really a God moment and just neat to see how God has crossed our paths in different ways ever since. So we connected first during that time. I met with you and Jenny for a little while. Everyone's got issues behind the scenes and things that they struggle with, but you and Jenny had the humility to say, "Hey, we need some help. Let's talk through this. We want to become as healthy as we can be, just like you're pursuing your physical health and you're going to the gym and you're wanting to be as healthy as can be. You wanted to be as healthy as you could be emotionally and relationally. And it was just really incredible to be a part of that process. Fast forward a little while. I'll never forget the day when I got a call from you and you were in a really hard season. So I would love to just kind of dive right into that and hear your perspective and what was going on with you and just kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's all the nicks and bruises of regular life, and but then I think there are sometimes trials that come upon you that are like fiery trials, maybe that are more than just a routine. I feel like when you're leading, there's always like something you're dealing with, but then sometimes things come upon you that are almost like more than you can bear.
Yeah.
Like David in the Psalms would call that like a deep pit or a terrible pit, which is different than just the normal, hey, there's the presence of my enemies, right? Fear and worry that comes upon us daily, Paul said. But then I think we have like super stuff. It's like, man, Paul said one time we despaired of life itself. And what you're referring to, it was May of 2020 was one of those times. It was just like, well, this is a pit. I don't know if
Wow.
I'm going to get out
5
of
years
this.
ago. Like we're in May of 2025.
Right. Yeah. So that's great. Jenny and I were just talking about that today because today's the 5 year anniversary of her book coming out.
Yeah.
And there was so much to that. Of course, the world was in a weird place in May of 2020, but I was personally at 38 heading towards a full blown like midlife crisis combined with maybe a little bit of a nervous breakdown from two really intense decades of ministry. And I think there was a lot of unprocessed trauma from my childhood that I just had battened down the hatches on and decided wasn't a factor and just going to stay like a ticking time bomb. So to be specific and enter in, um, I had at bedtime a panic attack like I had never experienced that I thought was maybe me having a heart attack. At first, I thought my heart was going to burst out of my chest. It was at bedtime. I started sweating. I woke Jenny up and was like, "Hey, could you pray for me? Something's wrong." And then my mind started racing. And I've had, moments of anxiety in my life, but nothing quite like this, where I
Yeah.
literally thought I was going to jump out of my skin. Like I thought my whole insides was coming out. And I grabbed my Bible, turned on the bedside lamp, started reading the book of Ephesians, trying to calm myself down. And all the words like were jumbling around on the page. And like I couldn't make sense of any of them. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's not working. Okay, I need to listen to maybe a sermon or something like that. And I turned on a Louis Giglio sermon from Passion City Church, and it, like, whatever he was saying was like jumbling in my ears, and my it was like hot, and I couldn't focus. And I literally remember thinking, okay, if the book of Ephesians and Louis Giglio aren't helping me, I'm in big trouble. These are two big go-tos in my life.
Right, right. And this was the middle of the night?
It's bedtime.
Okay,
It
yeah, before
continued
bed.
all night. It continued all
Yeah.
night. I think I had woken up out of a dead sleep, actually. But like, I felt hot. I felt like I needed to go, like, pace the room, and I was trying to, like, lie and be still, and all I could think was, I'm gonna hurt myself. Like, I'm in so much distress, I'm gonna hurt myself. And the thought occurred to me, um, your next door neighbor is a police officer. You need to go knock on the door and ask him to, like, restrain you so you don't do something to yourself right now. Like, I
Mm,
was in such fear and such panic, and I was trying to catch my breath, couldn't. I was like, my heart was racing. And so finally I told Jenny, like, I need to take a shower. And I stood under the stream of hot water and was sweating. Like, it was just the most bizarre thing. And I turned the water to cold, and I couldn't stop sweating under cold water. And finally, after a couple hours of this, Jenny found this, like, a Christian meditation app that she, like, downloaded, and was, like, playing breathing exercises and, like, meditations. And I would, like, calm down, and then it would come up again. And this lasted for, like, till 2 in the morning.
ugh,
And it was just awful. So I remember, I called the next morning. I called my doctor to make an appointment to see if I, like, was having some sort of physical event. I called you and asked for an appointment for counseling. I called a couple pastoral friends, and then it was just literally, that was the day that 18 months of really hard work began.
yeah. Which is crazy to hear you say that because from the perspective of us outside looking in, it feels like you've already done so much hard work. Like you've gone through suffering and pain that some people will never even know. And it almost makes me wonder if walking through that season of suffering with Lenya going to heaven almost made you have a higher capacity for suffering than maybe someone even should. It's like the capacity is so big that you can almost handle above and beyond what an average person might be able to handle before they break.
Maybe. I mean, I believe that theologically, and I think it makes sense from what I understand psychologically about how people can have post-traumatic growth, not just post-traumatic stress.
Right.
um and I've really focused hard on letting God heal all those things. I got, lots of different counseling for Linya's death, all of that. And then, of course, you counseling Jenny and I through our marriage so much. But I think, what's weird is, I think I just had never really opened up a lot about childhood stuff
Yeah.
for whatever reason. In a marriage counseling, it doesn't really come up as much. And a lot of what was started to come out in the next 18 months. And specifically, I booked an intensive, like, a counseling intensive situation, where I was 8 hours a day for 4 days in a row. And it was surprising because I went into it already kind of, like, pre-deciding it wasn't going to just be, oh, my childhood wounds and my mom did,
Right. Right.
and I think I was so annoyed at the cliche of all of that. And I was so horrified when really what started gushing out was so much childhood stuff that I just hadn't really ever faced down, connected to my parents' divorce, connected to the suicide of a youth pastor. When I was in middle school, my youth pastor and later on committed suicide, and it registered this deep terror for me of someone letting me down by suicide. And it lodged in my head that, like, my greatest way of letting down the people I've led to Christ, my readers, my family, of course, number one, my church, would be me taking my life. Which, it makes sense, it all adds up, but it was just staring me in the face to actually process some of all that.
Yeah. And in those moments, it's not that you're backtracking, it's that God is inviting you deeper. That's the beautiful part of it. It's because I see your life as a journey of healing. Like you have been doing the work. It's not like the work was brand new for you, but you're right in saying I did the work of grief. I did the work of dealing with marriage, dealing with my stuff, Jenny's stuff. And now it was like the next level of dealing with childhood, dealing with the things underneath the surface, God inviting you deeper.
Yeah, and I think, the way you helped me understand it when I called you that next morning, and I'll never forget sitting in our guest room, like bawling, like with Jenny and I sitting there telling you what had happened the night before, and feeling so much fear that it was going to happen again, and where was it coming from, and why now? Because I was finally getting a break. Jenny was going to preach for the next 5 Sundays because her book had just come out that day, and I was so exhausted from that whole sprint season and then the pandemic and all of that, that I finally was like, today's the day that my rest is supposed to begin, and now this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to have a month off of preaching, and you said soldiers get they don't feel the war while they're at war. They get to feel the war when they get home.
Right.
And it made so much sense that I was finally, my body felt safe enough to let me know what,
Right.
what was there. And I think I wasn't wise always with how I let Linya's death drive me almost to a frenetic level to
Yeah.
to make the devil pay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of that pace, for 20 years, building Fresh Life for the first 10, and then the next 10 after she died when I turned 30, and just, it was almost like burying myself to some degree in, you know, ministry.
That's really insightful. And for you to be the one to say it is even more insightful of there's a level to which you can deal with the grief, but then there's a level of, like you said, I want to make the enemy pay. So I'm gonna go hard at the expense of maybe ignoring some signals,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want the enemy to win. But then you were so tired. You got to a point where it was like, okay, it's time. Your body's like, SOS, SOS. It's time to do things a little bit differently. And that was a moment of things shifting. That was a moment of honoring your capacity.
Yeah, and I hadn't really ever flirted with those boundaries before. It just, I had a larger plate. I had more coal to put in the fire until I didn't. I think that was the hard thing, was like going like, oh wow, I'm at the end of my rope. As far as, during that season, it was so humiliating. I would there's one time I was on the floor in my bathroom in my little area where I have to prepare and study, and I had to go out and preach, or to service was starting, and I just didn't have anything. I had a whole I had a whole sermon written, but I had nothing like to draw on to go and do it. And I was like, I'm a mess. I can and I found a way, and I to my credit, and I think partially it's muscle memory. Like I didn't let that keep me from what I believe. I believed in what I was saying. I believed I
Yeah.
was helping people, pointing people to Jesus. I didn't really open up about all that in that season. I focused more on, like, I'm going to talk to you and friends and
Yeah. Yeah.
pastors, and I involved our board of directors, but I didn't like let that. If I would have let that seep into the groundwater of my preaching, I think it wouldn't have been helpful. It would have been like reading your diary out loud to the world.
Yeah. I think it was wise, actually. I do. Because it's good to be vulnerable, but there's a level of vulnerability that can set you up for more hurt if you're not careful. And so I think what you did was wise. You were healing internally and doing what you needed to do to help people externally. And the two didn't have to cross over in that season. I think that was really wise because you were still learning. Like, what do I do with this stuff? How do I get through it? And it's hard to teach people when you haven't gotten through it yet. So I actually think that was really wise that you just kind of kept that between you and your trusted friends and counselors and God.
Yeah, and it felt important for me, like almost like they talk about why the Titanic fell. It's because four waterproof doors got breached. It had it held two more or whatever, it could have stayed up. I just sort of had to shut a couple fire walls and
Yeah.
shut off some watertight doors. Be like, we're not opening that up here. And it wasn't like I was being fake to our church or in preaching or in even writing. I mean, I wrote books in that season. I just those books didn't talk about those things. Those there were parts of me that needed just the eyes of God in that season, and then I still believed everything I was preaching with all my heart. It was just there was a lot of questions that I still was working through.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in that season when you had talked to me, especially the next morning about you're like the Bible didn't work, prayer didn't work, like I don't know what to do next. And I explained to you that you have to fight physical with physical. So when you're having these physical symptoms and your cortex is offline, it's not working, the part of your brain that's logical and thinks ahead, and when that part of your brain is not functioning because your fight or flight system, your amygdala has taken over, you've got to focus on getting the amygdala calm down. You got to kind of bring your body back to baseline, and then your cortex will kick back in. So it was just about learning how to calm your body, how to breathe, how to do physical things to get yourself back to baseline. And then you can start thinking through, well, what happened and why did that happen and what do I need to do differently? And,
Yeah.
God's word and all of that.
Yeah, I think it's like trying to shout at a fire alarm instead of punching in the code. It's like for me, understanding what was happening was in my body and in my brain, and the logical side. I tend towards like logic. Like I can think my way through this. I can, come up, read a psalm, say a prayer, but to know like, okay, no, I need to do a breathing exercise, bring my autonomic nervous system, just level those things down through. And then also it was also really important for me to understand what got me there. Like where
Yeah,
did it come from? So my initial, of course, I with advice, got my doctors to give me a prescription for Xanax so I could, if the fires got built, put them out, while also looking at my life from a bigger perspective and figuring out where this was coming from, how to not end up
right,
here again, what
right.
tools. And but it was really helpful to have that, to put the acute outbursts out while also trying to deal with the chronic, you know,
Right.
stuff.
Right. And I think some people try to focus on either or. So some people will say, okay, I'm just going to focus on preventing panic attacks. So I'm going to learn all of the activities and all of the exercises and the grounding techniques and have my medications, but they stop there. And that's short-term relief. But then if you're wanting to do the work, but your body's not cooperating, you can't gain ground because you're not able to do the work while the alarms are going off all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a combination of, okay, I need to bring my body to baseline so that I can do the work, so that my body can remain at baseline more often.
Yeah, and all of that was helpful. All of it, like the short term stuff. I think having um examining everything I was eating, examining everything I was taking in, based on
Yep.
your advice, looking at pre-workout, figuring out like, oh, I was taking in one scoop of pre-workout alone 4 cups of coffee,
Right.
and then figuring out the bottle set on it may cause feelings of panic. I think you said like
Yeah.
this could cause a panic attack in someone without anxiety.
Yeah.
Plus I was drinking a whole pot of coffee every morning. And then so for a season, I couldn't have more than a cup of coffee a day. and then I would
Right.
switch to decaf or tea. Now I'm back on a higher amount of caffeine, but I'm still not taking pre-workout. I'm not, my pace is different. Before this season, I would think nothing of going to Africa or going to Europe and then rush right back into the next Sunday here and pre-record for while I was gone. And then, you know what I mean? Just all of that. Where now it's like, nope, I'm gonna, if I'm gone, there's gonna be a couple days recovery. I'm gonna tag a day or two on the end of a trip to just come down. And that was really important, like learning like going up has to be followed by coming down. Otherwise, you just come down a tiny bit and then eventually you're just peaked.
Right.
And that's kind of where I was at, and everything was just sort of spilling over. And there was a moment where I couldn't find something in the garage, and I realized like, oh wow, like I am just a mess because I was standing there in the garage, I couldn't find something, and I remember standing there going, this is it, this is where it all ends, and all my emotions were overwhelmed by me not being able to find something where it's like in a normal day I would go, go get another one. You know what I mean? Like it was just the responses in my heart were all four fire alarm
Right.
responses to little things.
And I think that is a good sign for people who don't know, how do I even assess when I'm getting there? I think it's the smaller things start to become a little bit more overwhelming. You start to feel more overwhelmed in your day-to-day life. You start to see a little bit more tension in your day-to-day relationships. It's like when the margin starts to decrease, the feelings of overwhelm, frustration, they start to increase. And so the problem is a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of the buildup, or they're really good at managing it, ignoring it, pushing through it until the body's like, I'm done. I'm done. Like, we can't, there's no more space, there's no more margin. And then it all just kind of comes up to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that paired with what am I doing externally to contribute to this? Caffeine, diet, nutrition, exercise, like it all adds
Sleep was
up. Sleep.
massive, alcohol, all of that, like the effect of, I'd never really understood even just a little bit of alcohol, how dramatically that decreases quality of sleep. So
Yeah.
doing things to focus on getting a good night's rest, not trusting how I felt on a bad day, and making big decisions. And that was one of the things that I think was another, like if we're talking about the Titanic again, one door that I had to close off for a season was opening up any about these wounds in public forums. It just wasn't, I wasn't, they weren't, it was too much blood. The other one was, I just decided I'm not making any big decisions in this storm. Anything, because I was having all these thoughts. Maybe I'm not meant to be a pastor. Maybe I'm meant to just write books. Maybe I'm meant to, just be a speaker. Maybe, all of the thoughts. And I was like, everything I'm doing with regards to what we're doing right now was based on a calling, not a feeling. I didn't feel like playing fresh stuff. I felt called by God to. I didn't feel like living where we are. I felt called to. And so now all the feelings were churned up, and I just decided I'm not going to make any decision to change a calling based on a feeling.
Yeah.
And so through that period, it was like I had just decided in my heart, no big decisions were going to get made, And now I'm on the other side of that season looking back, and I'm like, man, I'm so grateful I did nothing. I'm so grateful I just focused on the healing journey,
Yeah.
because now I feel very differently about everything that in the moment. So I think like the ability, if you're in a storm right now, to just decide I'm not making any long-term decisions in anything based
Right.
on a temporary feeling.
Yeah, even the decision to, yeah, quit something once and for all. Like, let's just wait and see, how I feel and function from a healthier place. Let's just wait and see. You can put things to the side, right? That's
Sure.
important. But to make big decisions from the pit, you're not seeing clearly.
Yeah. Wait till Dr. Jekyll comes back. Don't let Mr. Hyde, make you do something you're going to like, what, why would we do this? This is
Right?
because you're not going to always feel, I just speak hope to someone. You're not always going to feel like you feel right now.
Yeah, even though it doesn't seem to be true, because it's like, is this ever going to go away? Am I ever going to feel like myself again? Like, where did I go?
Yeah.
You will feel like yourself again. You will. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a matter of time. and I always say this, but I feel like it's so important. It's a season where God is revealing what he wants to heal. And it doesn't always feel good, but it's a season of healing. Like there's healing coming, there's healing that's being revealed. There's something happening here that's going to shift things so that I can get to a better place. You talked about dealing with some of the things from the past. I think people underestimate the fact that our past creates the narratives that we live out of today, whether or not we want to. So someone's past story might be a story of growing up in a home where they had to be responsible for everybody else's feelings and emotions and needs. And so if I don't do it, nobody else will. And so they grow up being somebody who just gives too much and does too much and fills in the blanks for everybody and gives 110%. So let's say someone like that gets to a breaking point. It's not just, hey, we've got to adjust your external life, but hey, we've got to adjust some of these internal narratives that are driving you to live this way. And that's where I think dealing with the past is so important because we're adjusting the narratives that fuel the unhealthy lifestyle. We're alleviating the pain of the present, but we're also getting to the roots from the past.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah.
So, what are some narratives that you've had to face and break in order to be able to do things differently in this season? The one that you mentioned that I want to highlight again, because I think it's so important, is feeling like you have to do a certain amount of things to perform, to go hard, to kick the enemy in the face, basically, so that Lenya's death is not in vain, so that the enemy doesn't have the final say. Like there was a part of that narrative. Can you dig into that just a little bit? Because I think
Sure.
that's really powerful.
Well, there's a healthy side of that and a beautiful side of that that I believe to my core. The
Yeah,
redemptive side of whatever we experience, that God can turn that and make that um beautiful. I love
yeah,
that. So
yeah,
getting to write her story, and Jenny and I have both gotten to publish books about that, Roar Like a Lion, the amount of people who have been able to hear her story and be encouraged. I'll be grateful for that for my whole life. But I also
mm,
think there was a part of me that, as that began to open up, that I kind of was running a little bit from something in that, because it almost felt like in my mind, like, if we can do enough, like if I can bring her honor, if I can, there was almost like this, there was a sense in which there was like a little bit of a shadow side, I think, of me coping. Now, is an addiction to preaching and ministry better than drugs? Probably. I that's but it's still,
yeah,
it's still coping. I think it's still, there's still some numbing in
yeah,
in that. And I
yeah,
think, Linya is in heaven with Jesus no matter how many times I preach. So there was, of course, no end line to that.
right,
And I think it was just a little more, um it was more, I'm looking back, seeing there was more maybe that I was trying to medicate with than just, I'm going to try and find redemption in it. And I think I'm looking back on that and understanding and appreciating that I went into all of ministry with some emptiness inside of me, from childhood wounds, from my parents' divorce, from XYZ, that I just never knew were there.
yeah,
So it's not like I was ever sinister in my motives. I always wanted to preach Jesus and point people to the Bible and help hurting people. And with all of Linya's story, there's a beautiful side of that, but there's also a, a way in which I can see, oh, there's also just some brokenness that this was also mixed in with. So I think an unguarded strength is a double curse or a double weakness, right? So all of the strengths of preaching and helping and encouraging also could, when they're from an empty place inside me, also, have self-serving and have, you know, drive the ego and be a little bit numbing, and take, take a turn in how they come out too.
Yeah, you're right. And it's so subtle. It's so subtle that the only one that can really know is you. And I think for some people, that void, whatever it is, whether it's grief, whether it's trauma, whether it's self-neglect, they can externalize it and end up hurting others, right? With addictions and infidelity and all the things. But there's also, for some people, like who would never do that, you end up being the one that bears the brunt of it, you know? You end up being the one that gets hurt in the end. And I think for you, that's the one that really suffered in the end was you, and having to stop and say, okay, I got to take care of myself too. There's nothing wrong with taking care of myself.
Yeah, I think that's and if I had to do it all over again, I probably would pick that, of course, over infidelity or an addiction to a substance. But it did still allow me to come to the same place of like having to sit there and look at it all
Yeah,
and assess, and and I'm grateful because it doesn't undo any of the good.
right.
It's just allowed me now to reframe, reorient myself, have a better sustainable plan moving forward, where I'm still and thank God I'm still married to the same woman. I'm still leading in my family. We're still at the same church. We're going to do all the same things. We're just maybe going to do a little bit less. We're going to do it a little bit better. We're going to rest a little bit harder,
Yeah.
and do it from a little more of a whole place. Like, and one of the things, like, I don't know, I just maybe would never have done it. Like I was sitting there this morning, having my quiet time, just looking at a pine cone for a long time and just appreciating. I'm obsessed with the spiral pattern, and in a
Yeah.
pine cone, there's spiral, the way the pine, the little things are arranged, it's a perfect spiral. And I always keep one kind of sitting there where my Bible is and my quiet time stuff, because it's just like appreciating that God tucked that spiral into creation and into that little pine cone so it can bring more trees into the world, and just aware of even the way that he can use the beauty of my own spiraling moments to bring about, what he wants to in my own life.
Yeah. And I don't see this as you, reassessing so that you can pour out less. I don't see that happening for you. I see it as, higher levels of pouring out require higher levels of filling. And you just having to get to a place where you just are much more balanced. So, knowing if I have higher pouring out in a season, I have to have intentionally higher levels of filling up. And what does that look like for me? Because the reason we do everything, the reason we fill up to begin with, is so that we can do all that God has called us to do and do it more effectively. Because you're going to do this, Levi, for the long haul. You're going to do this for the rest of your life, and you're going to do it well. And in order for you to do it well and effectively and with all the anointing that God has on you, He needs you to be healthy and filled and stable and strong. And to me, that's what that season was. It was a season of strengthening more than it was a season of spiraling. It was a season of God saying, okay, it's time to pause and strengthen you for the next level of all that I have. And so it's neat to watch you step into that and be stronger in this season.
Yeah, and I believe all of that, and I think the experience, as brutal as it was, especially in the midst of the highest form of it, that 18-month long, 2 year long period was so intense. And yet, as I look back on it from 5 years, 5 years removed from it, it's incredible that um, I can and honestly say it was a really important time. It was a beautiful time. It was a necessary time of understanding, and I'm a more empathic person. I feel like I'm more kind to myself. I'm on my own side. I think there
Yeah.
was a lot from, I would be really hard on me for a lot of my life and be very so performance oriented, efficiency, productivity oriented, that it was never enough. No matter what I
Yeah.
did, it was almost like just always I couldn't celebrate, couldn't appreciate. So I think like even now, like just I'm on my own team. I think I'm not angry at what I'm not doing. I'm cheering for and pulling for myself, and I'm able to appreciate and be present in my own body, sitting still, taking a walk, like those little things. And I have more to give for me too, to
Yeah.
enjoy the ride of being alive. And I'm still hopefully stewarding well Linya's story and helping encourage people, and then there are new spiraling seasons too. I mean, I think um, we just closed out 1 year since my dad died, and that was
Yeah.
so much and so intense and so hard. That was like its own new grief, and so it's almost like closing out one chapter that was really difficult, being grateful, taking a breath, and it's just ready or not, here we come back
I
into another
know.
one.
I know. How do you feel like you've been doing through that season?
That was a tough year, Deborah.
Yeah.
Linya's death was so different than dad's. Um, I think he was my best friend in daily life, talking all the time, every day, and so to lose that so suddenly, um, I was really not prepared for how difficult that was going to be.
Yeah.
How am I doing with that today? Well,
Yeah.
I'm able to pull him in. I'm starting to notice that I'm able to pull his memory and the anticipation of reunion in, and not just be sad. Like there, I'm able to hold him and have space for him in my heart and be happy a little bit more. That took a long time with Linya. um it's starting to happen with him. For the first 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, I called him a couple times by habit, like, and they got the
Yeah.
the the dial tone. you know
Yeah.
Grief is so brutal.
Right.
That's a hard deal.
It is. It is. One way I try to conceptualize it is it's like this huge hole that's been dug in the foundation of your life. And what do you do with that hole? What do you do with that hole? You know? Do you stare at it every day and mourn the hole? Do you try to cover it up with a big tarp so that you don't see it anymore, but then you might accidentally fall in it when you least expect it? Like, what do you do with that hole? I think the only way is to start to fill it up with little scoops at a time of healthy things, memories, trying to say, looking at a pine cone,
Yeah, no, it's
savoring
true.
life.
No, it's true. And I think like you said a minute ago, I believe my life got bigger for the hole that was dug out of it with Linya going to be with Jesus. And I feel like that's happening in my heart now. Um, the hole can be filled and does get filled. And I was even this morning, I was reading about how Jesus had an earthly father in Joseph, and then how Joseph died, right? And it just hit me. It never occurred to me. Jesus, I wrote in my journal, you had to lose your father. Like
Mm,
Joseph's death, he had to mourn that. And that would have been so hard for Jesus in his humanity. And it just really encouraged me, because I felt seen by my savior, who had to bury an earthly father. And
yeah.
it just encouraged me. And then I felt some healing in that he had to walk with Mary, and miss Joseph every birthday and every anniversary of his death. And that, we don't know what age Jesus was, but however long it was, he had to deal with it. And then he had to, lose connection to his father on the cross. And so that felt really healing to me, to sit there with that. And I'm trying to differentiate all the time. One of the things that I talk about in the book that was really helpful to me was learning the power of differentiating your grief, so that it's not just one big pile of dad sadness, but to
Right.
pull out stuff like, hey, no one can take the memories away. That's staying. No one can take my future with him away. That's staying. So all I'm actually grieving is, okay, he's not going to be at Livy's wedding. He's not going to be at, you know, Lennox's high school graduation. That's what I'm actually grieving, not the other things. And then my pile of grief gets smaller, as opposed to just this massive, you know,
Yeah.
sadness.
Yeah. And it sounds like it, originally you filled that huge hole with Lenya by doing a lot of doing to fill that hole. And it sounds to me like you're at a place where filling the hole can also be being. I'm sitting here looking at a pine cone. I'm savoring this moment with the kids. I'm with Lennox right now. I'm not doing much, but I'm being present and I'm resting. I'm like you can fill it with doing and you can fill it with being. It doesn't have to just be filled with the doing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think I'm learning to do more than be. I'm learning to be more than do. I
Yeah.
think I'm Martha, usually not as Mary. And so it is a learned skill to sit. And um the sadness is not an enemy of that. I think it's a part of it.
Last thing I want to touch on, you're such a high capacity guy. Like anybody that knows you is like, only Levi would do that. Like there's so many things that you can do that the average person cannot do. So tell me, with your capacity, because it's going to be different than for other people. Like I don't want people comparing themselves to Levi Lusko's ability to do, but even you have a capacity. So, in what ways have you had to set boundaries? You mentioned a couple things, but I just want to kind of conceptualize it a little bit of I want to live with some margin. I want to live at 85%. I want to have a buffer emotionally, physically, mentally. Uh, so what does that kind of look like for you in your daily routine, in your schedule, in your ministry? Like what does it look like to be a little bit more intentional with that?
Yeah, I think I do have a larger capacity. I've learned for sure. Like if I look at Jenny and I, she's always like, you know, for me, a day off, like I ran 5 miles, played tennis, hiked a mountain, and then was like, is it too much if we add on? And she's like, yes, it's too much if we add,
You're
but
the
it's like,
gas, she's the brakes.
yeah. So those things do fill me up though. So like
Yeah.
a day off where we had a bike ride and play tennis and did this like that. But I'm also learning to appreciate a day where I don't set an alarm and let myself sleep in and sit and have a movie marathon and all those things too. But I think like also just it's all the planned stuff is great because we're planning in, like I said, days of recovery and days resting preemptively. What I've gotten better at is saying no to the exceptional stuff. So for example, the week before this book came out, I got a call. Would you come to South Africa the week the book after the book launches, and preach? There's a arena, 8,500 people in this arena. It's going to be a great opportunity. Now I'm already programmed and planned book tour, this stuff, this things, and we looked at the schedule, and technically I could have done it. It would have had to, I would have had to fly straight after this one event, straight to Johannesburg, like second longest flight on earth. I would have landed with hours to preach. Then I would have pretty much had to go straight back to the airport afterwards and come home. And I would
Wow.
have come in hot, having to prep on the plane for the next thing. And we looked at the flights and I came dang close to saying yes. And then I was like, wait a minute. No.
Yeah.
And what are they going to do if I say no? They're going to look. I was probably not even the first on their list. I was probably third or fifth, right? And there's probably four more names when they sat down and came up with the 10 names they could replace this guy with.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, I don't have to do this. I'm already doing everything I have perfectly. I'm so sorry. No. And
Yeah.
realize and everything, guess what happened? I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
sure
It's fine.
they
Something
figured
good
something else
happened.
out. But I was there
So
with Lennox to play football, and I was, you know what I mean? And I was a better
yeah,
version of myself. And so I
you're
think
present.
that's where I've gotten better
So
at.
answer me this, is the hard part for you in saying no, I don't want to let people down. I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. I don't want to have to admit that I can't do something because it's too much. Like I don't want to have to admit that I have a capacity. I'm limited. Like what do you think is the deep like it's hard for me to say no because
There's a lot. I think it's all of the above. I mean, there's little bits of everything you said. I think stewardship. I've always felt this sense of like I need to steward the gifts I have. I don't want to be the
yeah,
one talent guy hiding my talent in the ground.
yeah,
My parents' divorce, I ended up like running into church, running into ministry in that. And I got my dad's affirmation and I got my dad's, love, kind of Jacob, not Esau in that, or Esau is not Jacob in that way, like for being my father's footsteps. Like, and I always got a lot of validation from always having my hand up to do whatever. And so I think there's little bits of that. And as hard as it is to say, hey, I just can't, I don't want to let you down. I love being the guy that comes through. I love
yeah,
the rush of it all.
yeah,
And I do love preaching. That's the other thing. I really do love what I get to do. So I think just being respectful of my own margins, of the cost and the toll to my family and to myself, and being mindful that I cannot do everything is a it's been a really good learn for me in this season.
yeah, yeah, and being kind to yourself, like you said. Like, you know what? It's all right, Levi. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, I'm my own friend now. It's a whole new life. I really enjoy it. And the healing journey was so helpful. Like I'm so thankful I got to go through all of that intensive and hard season of deconstruction of my own life so I could reconstruct my life. That's an important second half
Yes.
of that.
Yes.
Is I got to have really healing conversations with my dad and share all of that with him, and in a non-judgmental way allow him to see how some of those things shaped me. And then even it was a really healing thing. Both my mom and my dad and I, it was hard, but some really good conversations with them that I'm just glad he didn't die with all of that unresolved. That we got to have a whole new level we were building of intimacy
Yeah.
by
That
going
is
there.
beautiful.
Yeah.
God wants to heal your present. He wants to heal your past. He wants to heal every part of your life. That's what he does. That's what I love about him is he's not just interested in who you are today. He's interested in who you were. He's interested in healing that as well. And when we align ourselves with his healing, the future is so bright. And so I'm grateful for you, Levi. It's just been such an honor to walk with you and Jenny through ups and downs and just have a small glimpse into what God is doing in your lives. And you don't just talk the talk, you really walk it, you live it out. So I'm just so grateful, and I'm grateful for this book that you just wrote so that other people, I called it a roadmap, so that other people can kind of find their way out of the spiral. Tell us a little bit about that and just your heart behind the book and where people can find it.
Sure. Well, thank you for your role from day one in our lives in this specific spiral I'm talking about here, but also our marriage. You've been very helpful to Jenny through her own issues. Because it's funny when you're married, you're like two people individually spiraling often, but
Right.
then simultaneously in a marital spiral. And but God's the God of the dance, and so that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We all get to dance that out with Him and with each other. And um, as much as we talk about the hardest stuff, there's also the great stuff. There's the beautiful
Mm.
stuff. There's the blessings. There's the sunshine. There's the bike rides. There's the afternoon pizza on a Saturday, right? So This book, Blessed Are the Spiraling, How the Chaotic Search for Significance Can Lead to Joy Through Life's Shifting Seasons. It's written from the perspective of a person turning 40, having all of the normal questions about, are my glory days behind me? Are they still in front of me? What does getting older look like? How do I retool for the second half of life as compared to the first half of life? What does it look like to live a life that involves a glorious death? Can there be a glorious death? All of that, the big questions we all tend to ask at the big transition moments. It's all kind of hopefully a guide that can help people process aging through a biblical worldview, which I don't think culture gives us a lot to do with that. It's like, hey, just Botox away the wrinkles and dye away the gray. But to understand like that God has a plan for your old age, just like he does your young age. And how, because that was also simultaneously something I was trying to figure out. I didn't know how much my identity was wrapped around being a young pastor, because I got ordained at 20, started a church at 23, wrote my first book at 30. So much of my identity was being a young pastor, and then hitting 38 and also going, oh, I'm not really a young pastor anymore. So who am I if how I see me has been taken from me? And
Yeah.
knowing that a lot of people are navigating those sorts of identity based questions.
Yeah, it's going to help so many people. It already has, and it's going to help so many people navigate and get excited about the healing journey, I think, instead of dread it. Realize like, okay, this is good. This is good for me. There is strength on the other side of this. So I appreciate you and I appreciate your time today and your friendship. And thanks for this book. I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you, Deborah.
Take care.
Bye bye.